Welcome to No Compromises, a peek into the mind of two old web devs who have seen some things. This is Joel.
And this is Aaron. So I went to your site the other day, Joel, and it was really slow.
First of all, I don't have a site. We have a site.
No, I went to joeclaremont.com. It was just so
Oh,
slow. I couldn't
I
even,
can't
it
blame
was
you.
just so slow.
All right, Aaron, you need to be more specific. What was slow? Maybe it was your internet connection.
Oh, I don't know. It was just slow. It wouldn't let me do anything.
Oh boy, he's role playing the typical user bug report, and it's triggering me a little early in the morning here, but I think you're trying to make a
Yeah,
larger point.
yeah, I'm trying to talk about like when someone says something is slow, what does
Yeah,
that actually mean? We need to dig in on that a little bit. And as
sure.
developers, I think it's our job to have that conversation back and forth a little bit
Yeah.
with the stakeholders so that they understand when they say something is slow, you need to define a little bit more like what were you expecting it to be? You know, how fast were you expecting it to be?
Yeah.
And what did you think was supposed to happen? And what are you comparing it to that you feel it's slow? And you know, all those different things are like the first sort of level of stuff that we want to focus on. And then I think then after that, you kind of go into more of the technical questions.
Yeah, and I want to throw one more on there, unless
Okay.
it maybe it overlaps with something you said, but like, is this newly slow or has it just always been
Mm,
slow and you're finally mad enough to like say something about it now? Because
right.
that I think that's useful information. Like, oh, it's slow today. Yesterday it was fine, or no, it's been slow for a year. Like that, where
Right.
my brain goes. I would like to know that.
It's been slow for a year, but I just ignored it and didn't tell you until I got really angry.
This happens. This is very
Yeah. Yeah.
common.
No, I think that's important context when we're talking about slow websites,
Mhm.
to understand how long, what the context is, and all that stuff. And then we want to move over to the actual troubleshooting. I mean, that's probably
Yeah.
why most developers are listening. Like, okay, we get it, something's slow, but what are the parts that we need to start checking for that are actually slow now? And what
Hmm.
does slow mean? And how do we even understand how we would fix something that's quote slow?
Right. I was just gonna say, I know you did this unintentionally, but actually, my site is slow sometimes, and I know why. I just haven't fixed it yet. But I'm like, Aaron's gonna call me out right now. Like, what's going on here, man?
It's probably your picture that spins upside down when you hover over it. That's what slows everything down.
Spoiler: it is a CDN thing, but anyways,
So I think the first thing to take a look at is when we're ourselves measuring the speed is, are there any sort of metrics that we can look at first of all to even understand if we're going to make this better, right? So
hmm
if someone says it's slow, that's great, but how do I know I made a difference? And how can I tell them when I've made that difference that it's improved? Because hey, if you increase the speed by 50%, that's huge. And also going from 30 seconds to 15 seconds for a page load, the customer probably won't notice. You know, they'll notice, but they won't
yeah,
care. So having
it's a
these
move
metrics
in
at
the
least
what?
having these metrics at least help you like have a story to tell as you're troubleshooting and building a solution.
Yeah, yeah, and we might be proud of that 50% improvement, but it's still bad, right? It's a move in the right direction, but you still have some work to go.
Right. So the first thing that I would look at for something like that is more of like that the front end.
Mhm.
Let's look at the inspector in Chrome or DevTools or whatever and see if there's any delays there. I want to, if I'm not familiar with that tool in the network tab, I want to do a little research into that, understand if there's some longer running stuff in here, because you can usually see if there's maybe a request that's taking a couple seconds. So is it JavaScript that's blocking it? Is it the page just coming from the server? Is it all
Right.
the different assets? And we know, especially as well, HTTP 2 and HTTP 3 technically are supposed to help with some of these issues, but until everyone supports all that, is there a number? Is there too many files coming at one time? Should we combine some of those? There's all
Yeah.
these different sort of like front end questions is the first place that I'd go look.
Well, let me see if there's like if that's step one. Is there a step zero, which is like you obviously implied in this is you try to reproduce the slowness, right? Like you if you can't observe it yourself and you're just relying on a somebody else's bug report, like then you probably wouldn't start digging into the internals, right? You'd like would make sure that you can actually see what they're seeing and you're on the same page as them.
Yeah, I think to an extent, but to another extent, you'll never see what the client is or the customer is seeing because everyone's computer and internet connection is different
Yeah.
and whatnot.
Yeah.
So usually when a customer complains that something is slow, I mean, there's 50-50, right? It was their internet or it's your site, one of the two,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and but even like within the bucket of it's your site, it could be like their particular account on the site, right?
Hmm.
Or it could be the time of day they were doing it. I just, slowness is one of those things that can be really
Right.
finicky to get your hands around.
You're right, because it could be like an account that loads a bunch of customizations for a theme that's slowing it down or something like that. That makes total sense. So yeah, definitely a
Yeah.
step zero then is make sure you can identify the problem, you can see the
Yeah.
problem yourself.
Okay. But
Step
then,
step one, check that front end and look at
right.
the network inspections and see where the timing issues are and all that kind of stuff. And before any back end programmers go, ha, and any front end programmers flip me off, I'm not saying the front end is always the problem. I'm just
Right.
saying there's a number of tools that are available on the front end that can show us if the front end or the back end is more likely the culprit.
Yeah, it's certainly worth looking at, right? Like if you just skip past that and go straight to the back end, you could miss something that's pretty obvious. And I think it's probably even one of the easier spots to just like see the graph and look at it and see and just know, oh, is there something here to work on or not? And then move on to step two.
Well, speaking of that, that next step, that step two,
Yeah.
that back end, what would you
Mhm.
do, Joel, to sort of troubleshoot a slower thing? If you have a general idea, it's the back end.
Yeah. It kind of depends. A lot of the projects we support have some sort of performance monitoring tool in place. Like Sentry is one that we use. The reason I hedge there is because even if that's in place, the way those tools work, at least at the pricing levels we're comfortable with, is you're generally only sampling requests
Hmm.
in terms of what shows up. So depending on what your sample rate is and how frequently this happens, it might not even show up. But like best case, if it's visible in a tool like that is where I would go first because
Yeah,
at a
I'm
high
gonna
level,
I'm gonna be the cranky old man and say no.
oh come on,
We should have enough tools in our toolbox in our tools that we're using on our back
yeah.
end that we don't have to pay and buy someone else to tell us how our server's going. What would I do if I didn't have a paid solution like Sentry?
Well, I mean, you could just look at PHP FPM log or your Nginx logs, things like that, just to see if they're reporting the same slowness. And obviously, we're talking mainly about Laravel apps. So
Hmm.
Laravel has some tools that are available as first-party packages, like Telescope. We typically don't run. In fact, I don't think any of our projects right now have Telescope enabled in production, but you can try to reproduce it locally, or you can turn it on selectively in production as well. But that'll give you a wealth of information too. And for the budget conscience, it doesn't cost anything, right? So it's just
Right.
the overhead of enabling it and making do with what you get in there.
Well, I guess I have to step back to step zero here real quick.
Okay.
Um, it'd be nice to be able to duplicate the problem the customer is
Yeah.
facing locally as well. Because if
That'd
you
be
can do it
awesome.
locally, then everything is great. Like you can use any
Yeah.
tool you want,
Right.
including other backend tools. Which one of the favorite ones that I've used in the past is like when things go really off the wall, really hard, and you really need to figure out what we're looking at. I'll use
Yeah.
Xdebug's profiling and tracing sort of functionality.
That's not one I reach for a lot, but that is the tool that will give you the most information. Like you can actually see down to like system calls and things like that, where if there's something really wacky, if it's not just like, oh, you're missing a database index, if it's something weird with file system locks or things like that, that's going to get you the answer. But yeah, I would much rather run that locally than try to get that going in production.
I like that you mentioned database locks because I think once we're on our back end side, we start to figure out was it front end or was it the back end?
Hmm.
Maybe it's the back end. So now is it our code or is it our
Yeah.
database? We can go to our database and then there's tools obviously in there to kind of determine if something is slow or not. Like in my SQL, for example, slow log file and things like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the thing there is ideally you will have those on already. Depending on how you're hosting your database and how it's maintained, it may not be on, right? Because logging does
Right.
incur a little bit of a performance overhead. But yeah, if you have to turn it on after the fact, you've kind of lost out on a lot of data. And I would also say if you had it on before the fact and you were monitoring it, maybe you would have solved the issue before somebody complained about it, right? Like that's the
Right.
ideal scenario. Um, I think out of the box, it's like 1 or 2 seconds. It's a pretty generous length of time for a database query, but you can even ratchet that down and maybe use like, hey, if any database query takes more than 500 milliseconds, I want to know about it. Like you might not act on it depending on what it is, but yeah, there's some pretty useful tools that again you get for free with the tools you're already using.
So I guess the question really at the beginning then was like, okay, the customer complained that the site is slow. What does slow mean? And then
Hmm.
where does that slowness, if it does exist and we can reproduce it, where does it reside? Is it that front end? Should we be looking at some of those resources, caching, all those different things? Is
Sure.
it the back end programming? Should we look at application performance monitoring tools? Should we look at profiling and tracing? Or are we going to go to like the database and explain some of our queries, look for things like that, depending on where the slowness is, which the customer obviously can't define where it is.
Right.
You can then start to develop a good process to troubleshoot slowness.
Or you know how I like to spend money. You could just buy bigger servers, right, Aaron?
Ah, Joel. Tell you, man, kids these days, they just don't understand.
I can
They
relate, but I want
just
to hear more.
They just don't understand. They don't understand the type of fun, the crazy fun we had growing up.
Oh,
Actually, this probably still happens these days. I just don't hang out at kids parks. Um, but there is.
good.
I was thinking about bumper cars. Like
Mm,
I don't know if that's still a thing, but what a weird thing. So, first of all, young kids, you're still developing. Great. Get in this car and try to hit people, possibly get whiplash. While you're doing that, look
yeah.
above you and notice the sparks. Well,
Mm.
yeah, that's electrified chicken wire. Don't touch that, and just like all these different things. Like, what was with bumper cars? I just don't understand. Like, what was the deal?
Well, you're missing a step too. Like before you get on the bumper cars, fill your stomach with like all sorts of candy and like greasy foods and stuff too. Just like absolutely set yourself up for disaster.
Yeah, and then bam. Oh.
Well, and it's good for your first experience being behind the wheel to be encouraged to hit other people. Like that's probably sending a
Mhm.
good message for later in life too.
Yeah. I mean, but they get some access to electric cars when they're young.
Nice.
I know I kind of glossed over Xdebug, but it's a super important tool that not many people know how to use.
If you'd like help getting that set up in your project, head over to masteringlaravel.io and contact us.